It's 10 o'clock. I'll call the meeting to order. Robert, I understand you want to make a motion to change the agenda. Is that correct?
That's correct. So what I would like to do, if it's okay with you, is after the mayor makes his comments, and I think after that, there's opportunity for members to comment. So, and then after that happens, there's kind of what we'll call loosely the deliberation process. But what I would like for you to do is to address the group prior to that, entering into that part of the meeting, and talk about three issues. The first issue is, you know, our meetings are obviously a little bit more informal than council meetings. And so the first issue is, would you like a motion to be made and then a discussion? Or would you like a discussion first and then a motion? The second issue I'd like for you to address is, for the benefit of the group, is if in the event there is a vote and the vote turns out to be 3-3, what is the significance of that vis-a-vis the particular motion? And then the last thing is, because of the way this platform works, it's not always easy to see what's going on. So I know normally we don't individually vote, but I would request in this time, this meeting and format and everything, that you actually ask each individual separately to cast their vote so we can see what's going on for the people who are not in the room.
Okay, and let's just take those one at a time. The first one, you wanted to ask me to ask the members.
No, I want you to tell us collectively as a group, would you like someone to make a motion initially and then have a discussion? Or would you prefer that we have a more general discussion and then at the end, someone make a motion? I don't really care one way or the other. I just think for the benefit, you know, our meetings are obviously more informal than council meetings. And I think in council meetings, typically a motion's made and then there's a discussion. I just want to, for the sake of clarity for everybody, just to let them know this is what we're going to do. We're going to make a motion, then talk, or we're going to talk and then make a motion.
You want to decide what you want to do?
It's up to you, Alan. I'm indifferent. And then the second thing, obviously, I just think for the benefit of everybody, there is at least a theoretical possibility, assuming Jennifer participates, and I can't really tell if she is participating or not. If she's participating, there is a theoretical possibility that you could end up with a tie vote. And I think we need to explain to our members what the significance of that is. And then just the last thing.
Let me go one at a time. I have a short memory.
Okay, all right.
And let's take the last one first. It seems to me, if we get a tie vote, I'm happy to explain at that point in time what it is. Because a motion either passes or fails, you need a majority to pass. If it's a 3-3 vote or a 2-2 vote, it fails.
Okay. All right. So you prefer to do that only if it arises?
Yeah, I do. I prefer, but if you want us to vote on
No, I don't. That's fine. Just as long as it's I said that's fine. Just as long as at some point we explain, because maybe we won't have a tie. But if we have a tie, people will obviously initially be confused about the significance. So then I guess it's fine at that point to step in and tell people what it actually means. I'm happy with that.
Second point backwards, I think the question of do we do a motion first and then discussion, or do we discussion and then motion? In the normal ordinary course, what we do is we do a discussion and then we do a motion. I don't care if you or other board members want a different way than that. That's fine, but I'm happy to explain. In the normal course, what we do is we discuss it, and then after discussion, after some portion of discussion, whenever someone feels that is clarity in their mind is such that they want to make a motion, they can make a motion. That's normally what we do, but I'm happy to do it differently. If you want to do it differently?
No, I'm happy to follow what our normal procedures are, although they may not necessarily conform with other entities. I'm perfectly happy with that. I just want to understand. So when we get beyond the member comments, we're going to basically immediately delve into what we typically do, which is have kind of a freewheeling discussion, and then at some point somebody makes a motion. That's fine.
And the first one, I forgot.
The last thing is, just because of the format, it's not always easy to know what's going on, and sometimes people have their screens blacked out. So I would just ask in this one case that people actually vote individually, because typically when we vote, people
That just takes a motion
or something like that.
It takes a motion, and when we get to that point, I'll ask if you want to make a motion to that effect, then you can make a motion. And in fact, all you have to do is ask it, and it's done. You're asking for it, and so it's done.
Okay.
That is, so at least we have individual votes. Is there anything else procedurally, Robert, or any other board member has before we get underway with the meeting today? The first order of business is opening remarks by Mayor Quinn. We're delighted to have you again, Mayor, and pleased to ask you to go forward.
Yeah, I asked Alan for a couple of minutes. I really only need about 10, 15 seconds. I think you all have more than enough information, or I don't know that we have anything to add. Hopefully you got Chris's notes that he sent yesterday afternoon. And where we are, that's it. It's just, and the reason why I was coming in here is just to thank you. The process, I think, is, it's been dragged on, but I think it's been great. The only sadness I have about it is when we were in the meeting the other day, and I don't know his name, but the orthopedist who was here, and he said, I didn't know about this until yesterday. So this is something that I think the village bought the property in 2017, so it's been wallowing around for 5 years, and the fact that we have somebody on the island who heard about it just like a day or so ago, there's a problem, and don't want to see that ever happen again. And I'm hoping that your board will push really hard on us to not let things like that happen again. I want to tell you that Chris and I, we spent a lot of time going over what we heard at these meetings and taking it to heart. And that's about it.
Thank you very much, Mayor. We really
thanks for your
appreciate
time.
your cooperation.
That's it. Okay. Good luck and have a good time.
Please go about Mayor.
Thank
You like.
Okay. Take care.
Thank you much. All right. Next we have comments from members. Are there any members present physically today or on Zoom who would like to speak?
I'm present by Zoom, would like to speak.
Please go ahead. Is that Justin?
Yes, it's Justin.
Welcome back, Justin. We're always delighted to hear from you.
Are you sure? I might have overstayed my welcome at this point. Just wanted to share a couple comments here. If I can just share my screen here. I'll try and make this brief. Can folks see that?
Yes.
Okay. I saw some of the comments posted from the village last night. I just wanted to respond to a couple that seemed to be fairly pointed. So like I said, I'll keep this quick, but the village made a comment about my cover slide and some selective cropping. There was selective cropping. This was the best picture that I had of the sunset of this area, but it included my daughter, my dog. So I cropped that out. But as you can see from the sides, this is the, didn't crop from anything from the side. And this was taken in September of 2020, right before the rehabilitation of 15 and 17. So you don't see those there. So the intent of this picture was to show the sun sitting right over the area where the project is to be built, but nothing else.
Justin, is that
yes.
ramp 7? Is that 17? That ramp?
That's 17. Yes.
Okay, thanks.
And the rails now go right there. So had a more current picture, I think it would have underscored the point that the rails and the rehabilitation only impacted the view, which echoes the broader point. The village also made a comment that the observation deck was an embellishment and is not the true form and function. I'm not sure if Mr. McCall is there, but he sent me an email on December 8th of last year, and when I had requested the drawings that had not been made public, and he sent them to me in this email attached. And this is the drawing that's here, and if you zoom in, the deck is described as a viewing gathering deck. And so whether it's a observation deck or a viewing deck, I see those as synonymous. In his reply to me, he said it's not intended to be a viewing observation platform, but it is a viewing deck. So whether it's an observation deck or a viewing platform or an observation deck, I'm not sure, but I would say that I don't think I'm embellishing by using descriptions that were pulled off the diagram that he sent me directly. And I think Mr. Quinn also indicated in the meeting on Monday that he welcomed people to use it as a congregation point and hope that it would be an attraction. So I think it's intentional. Village mentioned that in the response that the groin tubes were an issue for access 15 for considering access 15. If there's anything about selective cropping here, if you look, I mean, I think folks know there's a lot of groin tubes along the beach here. There's a groin tube right in front, maybe one lot over from where 16 is, but a very selective cropping line there. I don't know if that's coincidence or accidental, but there's a groin tube there. Lastly, there's, or maybe not lastly, there's a comment about the LiDAR on one of the proposed paths that I suggested. And again, my point was not to make firm recommendations, but was to put forward options and illustrate that there are options, that we are not down to a sole single option. There are other options that exist, but there's a comment about plus or minus 6 feet of elevation, and this is probably hard to see on the screen, but there's nowhere on here that shows 6 feet starting point elevation. The only point on this entire diagram that shows 6 feet is way over here. The area that even if you go all the way to Pepper Vine starts at 11 feet and goes to 13 feet for a 2-foot rise. There's one 14-foot spot right there and a couple over there. So I'm not sure what lines they were looking at, but the diagram that they sent does not illustrate the same delta that is in Rose Access 16.
Hey, Justin, before you
Then,
leave, can you go back to that
yes.
chart, Justin? There have been a number of comments with respect to 24B, that the dune levels at 24B are, and I've heard the number 4 feet above something, sea level or whatever the hell. Is that consistent in any way with all the stuff that you're showing us, or is that not true?
It is the rise that we've been talking about from the average grade, which in this area would be 11 feet, to the average peak would be 2 foot, 11 to 13. 11 is the brown, these lines here. And
Okay, so the starting point for
13 is the light.
the two options that you diagrammatically scoped out on Monday, the starting point where the parking is and an individual actually gets on the ramp at the beginning, the elevation is 11 feet at that point?
Correct.
And then,
Correct.
and then depending on where it goes over the dune, it's somewhere in the 13-foot range. Is that what this is saying?
Correct.
So the,
Yes.
so the 4 feet is in fact, if I'm reading this correctly, actually around 2 feet.
2 feet. Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
And then lastly, just wanted to make sure everybody understood the math, that similar to what we were just talking about at Access 16, the peak elevation of the dune crossing is 14 feet. The platform height, they've indicated they're designing to be 2 feet over the peak. That's a platform elevation of 16 feet. The parking elevation is 9 feet. So that's a net of, from the dune to the parking, of 5 feet.
Not,
So dune peak to the start to the parking lot, that's 5 feet. So they're talking about the 5-foot rise of the dune, which is correct. But the key point is that the platform is to be built 2 feet over that. And so you're talking about a net 7.
Okay, so in terms of
and
elevation
that's-
differences for the user, we're looking at it at one elevation, start to finish. So let's say start to peak height is 7, and the other start to peak height of around 2 to 2.5, 3, something like that.
Yeah, plus the
Oh, yeah.
platform would make it
Okay.
4.
4.
So you're
Okay,
talking
say
about
7 to
7
4,
versus
say.
4.
Okay, thank you.
And that doesn't count the oceanward side that drops down pretty steeply. I think the average grade of the flat part of the beach is around between 5 and 6 feet. So you still have to go well below the parking lot, but out of just showing what the village showed, I just kept it to the 9 feet to the dune peak. And then lastly, there's confusion about the concept of the 1-story high. So if the platform's at 16 feet in elevation, and which is a 14-foot dune plus 2 feet above the dune for the platform, and the rails are 3.5 feet tall, which I didn't mention before. So that's between 16 foot and 19.5 feet in elevation. My house starts at a 4-foot elevation, and my first floor is at 15 foot in elevation. So the platform height is above my first story by a foot. And then the rails put it squarely in between a first and second story height. So my point about the 1.5 stories is not to say that you walk up to it and it's a 1.5 stories tall structure in front of you. My point is that for the neighboring homes that are looking out over this stretch, they will be looking straight into a platform at their eye level. Maybe not if they're standing, if they're sitting. But the point being that the houses in that area, that even if you give the benefit of the grade that they're built on, which is 4 feet in my situation, and probably 4 feet for the other homes on the north side of South Bald Head, then you'll be looking at a platform that is at eye level to their first story. And that would not be the case in some other locations where the delta would be different, and they would, the homes would be say the first level deck of the home would be up here and the platform would be down here, and you still get the view over here. In this case, I'm saying it's going to be more like this. So that is my point regarding the 1 story or 1.5 stories. So there's a lot of other stuff that the village responded to that I won't go through, but I just wanted to point out those key things and thank everyone. Hopefully, just trying to be as transparent as possible, and hopefully this demonstrates that transparency and lack of embellishment. So thank you.
Thank you, Justin. Appreciate your fine comments today and a couple of days ago. All very helpful to us. And I again want to thank you for really being the person to most significantly bring this matter to our attention. Thank you for all. Does anyone have any questions of Justin?
I'm happy to answer any questions that the village brought up or anything.
Okay, then we're ready to proceed. If any other members have any comments they would like to make, either people sitting here with us today or on Zoom? Right, being none, we'll move to the next stage, which is deliberations. And deliberations.
I'm sorry, Alan. I do have three member comments that came in after the last ones were posted.
Oh, yes.
There is one from Mike Harriet. He says, unfortunately, I will not be able to attend the board pre-meeting this morning to discuss the village proposed ADA access project. I would therefore like to reiterate my recommendation that the board should not approve the village proposed ADA beach access for the many reasons presented at the previous meeting. I would also like to correct a statement made by the village representative, I believe from the Public Safety Department, who said that the handicap wheelchairs with the balloon wheels are easy to push and maneuver. Having used the wheelchairs as a caregiver, the wheelchairs are not at all easy to manage, even on relatively smooth surfaces. The inclines and switchbacks of the proposed design will be very difficult for those wheelchairs, which are the only type of wheelchair possible for the beach use. as long as the inclines will also be unnecessary obstacle for those having to walk, those having walking impediments. As I mentioned in my previous email, other existing beach access points, even in their current state, will be more useful than the proposed. My family and I strongly support construction of an ADA beach access, but we believe that a more environmentally and user-friendly access can be provided by upgrading an existing access point. Thanks for your leadership on this important island issue. And then there is one by Jay and Maureen, and I'm going to mess up their name, Copen. My wife Maureen and I have been BHA property owners since 1998. When we bought our Royal James condo in 2001, we moved into our Sable Palm Cottage number 11. We've been actively involved in BHI activities for the past 23 years plus. I was fortunate enough to be on the Conservancy Board for 7 years, serving the last 2 years as president during the construction of the Barrier Island Study Center. While we are pleased that the village is considering adding additional ADA access to our beautiful beaches, we are very concerned with the proposed location of the new access. The Justin, tell me how you say your last name.
Gravatt.
Gravatt, thank you.
Gravatt, yep.
Gravatt, thank you. I'm afraid I was messing it up again.
No, I get called Jason all the time. So as long as you get Justin, the last name's fine, however you say it.
The Justin Gravatt presentation provided very good and detailed information about the issues with developing the lot access point. We have personally witnessed the ocean breaching the dune near this location during a major storm a number of years ago. We subsequently saw dozens of islanders replant the grasses necessary to help stabilize the dune. Thanks to the efforts of these islanders, the current dune is truly outstanding.
There's a guy who lives near this and he did all this work, I guess, to.
Additionally, the traffic flow by this lot would be problematic with all of the ingress and egress issues already associated with the BHI Club. The last thing we need is to encourage more cart traffic in that area. For these reasons, as well as those outlined in the presentation, we hope that BHA and the village will reconsider the proposed location for additional ADA beach access. And the last one is my wife, Diane Robinson, and I want to add our voices to those who have opposed the ADA access on lot 1319. We fully support the idea of an ADA compliant access, but this one is a poor choice. That part of our dune has been badly damaged by storm surges and is now healthy again. Please leave it alone. As Rex Caldry pointed out, access 24B is a better choice to provide this surface to those with disability issue. Please consider this site over the one proposed. So, my apologies for not catching them.
Thank you for the comments. Does anyone have any comments on the comments? All right, we're ready to move to the deliberation stage. And the deliberation stage is the board making a decision. And this is public and everyone present welcome to stay. In the normal course, what we do is we discuss things because we heard from a lot of folks, both in writing and in public. Came and spoke and that have called many things. So it's all been very helpful. And that's been our job. Our job has been to seek the input of our members. That's what the covenants provide. Where there is a significant potential access like this, the covenants would request us to go forward and seek the input from most affected members. And it wasn't like we could precisely identify who that was. We concluded everybody was affected. And so we made a general notice to everybody and invited comment from everybody, and we were delighted to get comment from everybody. It's all been very helpful. But now we sit down and in the normal course, we discuss, or sometimes we're ready to vote. Do you all want to proceed to today? And then if we're ready to vote, someone makes a motion as to what it will be. Sometimes you can make a motion first and then discuss it, or you can discuss it and discuss it, and then somebody makes a motion. The second is what we normally do. But are people ready to vote, or would you like to have a discussion?
I'd like a bit of discussion.
Okay, that's what we'll do then.
Alan, I've prepared a handout, which when I get an opportunity to speak, I'd like for Carol to post it and talk to these various points in this handout.
It's all right to have Robert go first?
I don't have to go first, but I just want to have the opportunity to put the handout out there and talk through I looked at 13 different considerations. I just want to take the group through it at some point. I don't have to go first. It's totally up to you.
You're on, Robert, you got it.
Carol?
Just a second. I was dealing with something else there for a moment.
Well, we're doing that. The question I have is, did we receive any comments in favor?
No, we do not.
Okay, thank you.
I'll actually start while Carol's trying to put my document up. So my first point, there's 13 different points. The first point is, why are we here today? I think most of us probably know that, but I want to mention that we've been advised as a board that no matter where this facility is constructed on the island, and regardless of who owns the land, they need our approval to cross the dune, so to speak. In the case of 1319, because that particular location is subject to other types of covenant restrictions, they need the members to approve the covenant restrictions. But on some other lot, like for example 24B, even though the village owns that lot, we've been advised that we still have to approve their crossing of the dune. And the reason I mention this is because, as we all know, the village, or most people know, the village has no legal obligation to do this. So I'm assuming that they're doing this in the context of what they think is, an ethical, a moral, a kind of a humanitarian reason that such that it's quote unquote the right thing to do. And I personally, as a person, agree that it is the right thing to do, even if we don't have a legal obligation. We have no legal obligation. They have no legal obligation. But I do think it's the right thing to do. And as a matter of general principle, I believe we should be supportive of the village in doing this, particularly with respect to the issue of the fact that apparently we need to give consent for the ramp to be across the dune.
Robert, I can, for whatever reason, when I go to my email to pull that up, it is pulling up Pam Rainey's email on this computer.
All right, you want me to send it to you? I'll send it to you again.
Well, you can share it yourself. I will give you access to share it.
Well, you need to explain to me how I do it. Do I have to pull
I
the
will do
document
that.
up first?
So open the document on your screen, yes.
All right, hold on. Sorry about this.
Well, it's my fault because I had it right here ready to go, but for whatever reason, I'm getting someone else's email.
Oh, okay, so I've opened the document. Now
right.
what do I do?
Now, on your Zoom screen, do you see a button in the middle at the bottom that says share screen?
Well, I lost the screen because now it's tiny.
Okay, well, you can enlarge it. It's all right. Go
Okay,
ahead.
now, okay, so I see a green thing that says share the screen. So I click on that.
Click on that.
All right, and now
And
what?
you're gonna see a bunch of pictures, so just click on the one with your presentation that you want to pull up.
One click or two?
Just one. And that should do it, and then hit share and it should pull it right up. There we go.
Is it being
Yes,
shared?
It is, thank you, and I'm so sorry.
Oh, okay, I see. Okay, all right. Okay, so moving on to 2, with respect to 1319, it's subject to existing covenants. And just, think about what does all that mean? What is the so-called supermajority telling us? When our founding fathers, so to speak, set this whole thing up 40 years ago, they had firm ideas about where development should be, what type of development should be, and design criteria, covenant criteria. And they wanted all that to be treated, I'll call loosely, seriously by future generations. And so how do they go about doing that? They put in place a requirement that if covenants are going to be changed or lifted or whatever, waived in particular circumstances, you have to have a supermajority, which, as we know, those of us who are on the board know, that's 2/3 of the people who are at the meeting. And what that's telling us is, you really need to think long and hard. There needs to be a very broad agreement among all of our 1,800 or so, or however many people are voting, stakeholders, And in my mind, we should only do that in exceptional circumstances. Now, is building an ADA ramp possibly an exceptional circumstance? I would say under certain circumstances, the answer to that would be yes, because I think we all know that this is, quote, the right thing to do. But if there is a credible alternative that exists that achieves the same objective without requiring the supermajority vote, then I really question whether that's the right thing to do. The third thing is the role of the board. And I thought, we could do a couple of different things. We could vote to approve the request from the village. We could vote to deny the request from the village. And I guess potentially we could say, well, we're not going to take a position one way or the other. We'll just have a special meeting and let the stakeholders vote and see if we get a supermajority. Now, as many of you know, there's one person on the island who I know for a fact has spoken to at least 3 of the board members and has in fact written to all of the board members and was advocating very strongly that the board take a leadership role in this particular instance. And I thought about that. And this is a person who has spoken on occasion before council meetings and always has very thoughtful comments, very well articulated. I have a lot of respect for this individual. And I am persuaded by her comments that in this circumstance, because of the many issues that are involved here, we should take a firm position one way or the other. I don't think we should be wishy-washy. I don't think we should be neutral. We should either say, yes, we agree. We want you all to waive the covenants, to vote to waive the covenants, or no, we don't agree. And if we don't agree, I think some way we ought to try to articulate to our stakeholders why we came to that position, because there's not a lot of people listening today. Next item is the ARC approval. It's really significant in this particular instance. As we all know, ARC has got great expertise in reviewing and opining on residential development on properties that are already zoned for residential. They don't need to worry about, does it make sense or not to have a house on a particular lot? That's already taken for granted. They don't have expertise in approving commercial or what the village has now recently called recreational facilities. And they don't have any kind of significant design guidelines. And in fact, ironically, the design guidelines that they use to opine on ramps for residential houses are frankly inconsistent with what's needed with an ADA ramp. Because you need railings for ADA ramps. And you may possibly need a resting point or not, depending on the length. But there's kind of different things that you're looking at, different considerations. And nobody, ARC was asked to approve this thing, and they duly approved it. But when you think about what they're approving is what's actually going on here. You've got a simple gravel road, doesn't take much comment other than maybe to talk about the size. And you've got the ramp itself. But the reality of the ramp itself is almost totally dictated by either CAMA regulations or the ADA regulations that involve the mathematics of the ramping, 12 feet of length for every 1 foot of height, whatever. There's not too much that anybody could really say. The design is pretty well dictated by the various requirements. And nobody asked ARC what I feel is the more fundamental question is this the right place to build any ramp of any type, or other places that are more appropriate? Of course, they're not in a position to answer that. So I really came to the conclusion, rightly or wrongly, that the role of the ARC in this particular instance is really not significant. And we shouldn't be bound in any way by what came out of that process. The next item is the environment. Should we consider this or not? And I personally think we should consider this. That area where the, at 1319, if you drive along that area, it's either the last or one of the last areas of kind of a pristine view of what the dunes coming into the ocean area looked like on this island 50 years ago before it was developed. It's really a beautiful thing to drive by. And that part of the beauty of the environment is the very thing that attracts people to come here. And so why would we want to disturb that unless it's absolutely incredibly necessary? Some of those, I don't know if you noticed in Justin's map this morning when he was talking about it, he showed the owners. Some of the owners on that area are actually silt owners. And, which just goes to show that there are people on the island who also believe that that's kind of a pristine area that should be, maintained, and just people should be able to appreciate its natural beauty. So this is something that's pretty serious in my mind in terms of something you want to consider at Great Plains, and particularly if there is another viable alternative, then I'd be very reluctant to try to, promote the development of another ramp at that particular location. The reality is, as you all know, we don't need another access point there. There are already two in the general area. Okay, so the dune height, which I think Justin this morning clarified, I guess the 7 differential versus the 4 differential has some significance. Obviously, ceteris paribus, all other things being equal, a lower dune is better than a higher dune. And I'll talk more about that in the context of the ADA users in a minute. So we should give some preference to a location where the dunes are lower than higher. Justin also talked about visual impacts, and I think he showed some maps on his presentation on Monday about the people who might be affected in the 2 locations. And I think there were roughly like 11 that he was highlighting if it were built at 1319, I don't know, 7 or so if it were built on 24B. So what are those impacts? In my mind, there are 2. One is the, I'll loosely call the massing impact, which appears to be significantly greater at 1319 than at 24B. And then the second thing is the parking lot impact. I mean, frankly, at 24 or 25, whatever the number is, car parking lot of gravel is going to be pretty unsightly. And during the summer months, which I'll talk about in a minute later on, it's probably going to get a lot of use by people, not necessarily ADA people, but other people, day trippers, people who want to get a view on that resting platform or viewing platform, whatever people are calling it. But that's that. And so it has, whereas on 24B, we're only talking about parking lots for 4 or 5 ADA vehicles, maybe 6 vehicles, depending on what we really need, but not 24, not a gravel lot. And so in my view, there is a pretty significant difference in the visual impact. 8, 911 access. Can an ADA facility coexist? Justin pointed out on Monday that I think all the 911 accesses have multiple uses, particularly 42, which gets a huge amount of use by the public. It's one of the major beach access points on the island. And the 2 options of where a potential ADA facility could be built at 24B, the property owned by the village, neither of those had any overlap with the existing 911 access point. And I think the only potential impact to the 911 access point at 24B is maybe the possibility of putting some pavers in so that somebody in a golf cart could drive to the ADA parking lot and get there a little bit more easily. One member sent me an email yesterday saying they thought it would be difficult to drive it on the sand, and that if you were going to do something at 24B, there ought to be some type of upgrading, presumably through pavers or something, to the access point. But none of that would, of course, impair the village's ability to use it as an emergency location to the beach if need be. Number 9, cost differential. This is something that we should be concerned about. As a property owner, I would say, ceteris paribus, I'd prefer a cheaper solution than a more expensive solution. But BHA is not being asked to pay for it. And then I thought, if you were to do a Venn diagram of the population base of our property owners and the population base of the Bald Head Island taxpayers, it's a very close fit, but it's not in fact a perfect fit. There are different people who are paying property taxes on the island who are not part of the BHA. And so I ultimately concluded in my own mind that this is not something that, as a member of the board of the BHA, that we should focus on. And so I kind of put that out of my mind as a board member, although I would prefer, as a taxpayer, a cheaper solution. Okay, the disabled users, Carol this morning read the comments from Mike, who talked about the difficulty of moving those wheelchairs. John Fisher made a great presentation on Monday, reminding us all and pointing out to us all that there are many other potential users besides somebody in a wheelchair, people with a cane, people with a walker, people on crutches, people who have an artificial limb. That there's a much wider potential use. And I really appreciate, him doing that and bringing that to our attention. And what was the key message that we've heard from all these people? I would say reasonably simple. One is make the starting point as close to the beach as possible and make the elevation as simple as possible. Try to avoid, the switchbacks if possible. And so I think we have a clear message from potential users who are saying, we don't really like what's going on at 1319. It's too long. It's too difficult to navigate, and a lot of us may not use it. And then the concern is, are we building what I call a bridge to nowhere? And my concern is for disabled users, we are building a bridge to nowhere. Now, of course, obviously for non-disabled users, there are going to probably be a lot of users using that facility. There's an off-site parking, there's a viewing deck, but we're not building this ramp at that location in that environment where there are already 2 other ramps for day trippers and other users to go up and have a view of the ocean. That's not the purpose of what this is all about. 11, as Jennifer mentioned this morning, there have literally been 100% unanimity on the comments. And I have to step back in a minute, and I really want to say, I'm really proud of our members. They have done a great job. And I'm not really commenting in this instance on what they've said, just the fact that they participated in the process. We had phone calls, emails, letters, social media comments, people coming to make presentations on Monday. One other board member and I hosted a 2-hour in-depth dive into this whole subject, in which people came and we talked for 2 hours about the pros and cons. We got a lot of input. Several members went out, looked at the sites, and wrote very detailed comments to us about the pros and cons. Other people maybe talked more from the heart, but the message was completely and utterly uniform. And that message is very simple and can be summed up in 3 words: find another location. 12, the village's 2 objectives. So I think in retrospect, this was probably a little bit unfortunate that they combined the concept of an ADA facility with off-street parking. It certainly made the whole situation more complex and added a whole nother dimension. And my concern here is, of course, everybody knows there's a parking issue in the summer, particularly in certain places like 42 and access, I think 39, where they have the Howl at the Moon. There's some locations on South Beach that get a lot of activity. We need to do an island-wide study. They've already committed to do an island-wide study this summer. And one of our board members did what I'll call a quick and dirty review of what are parking possibilities that might address parking issues on South Beach only, and came to the conclusion that there are quite a few different possibilities. There's some smaller distributed parking. There are other areas where actually an off-street larger lot could be done in a different location that maybe is a little bit more appropriate. And so I just really thought that the village was putting the cart before the horse, so to speak, asking us to approve a large unsightly off-street parking facility at an environmentally pristine location before they've done the whole study to determine whether that's really the only alternative and whether there might not be better alternatives somewhere else. And then lastly, what's the relationship with what's the potential impact with the relationship with BHA and the village? This is an important issue to us. As you all know, there really has been no relationship at all, for probably a decade, between the board of the BHA and the council. Fortunately for both of us, the relationship at the staff level has been good, thank God. But at the more strategic higher level, really haven't had a relationship. Well, as you know, we've had a big change in the composition of the council, and the window seems to have opened up to have a more ongoing dialogue. We've had conversations with them about the Wilmington East wind project. And I have to say, I was incredibly impressed by what the village did there. They took a leadership role with the county, and they've actually had some material impact on that project. The people who are managing that project have already agreed to push the starting point back a few miles to mitigate the visual impacts. So I really want to congratulate the village for having, done what they've done. I've had a number of conversations with Scott about this. We've also had conversations with them, as you know, about this kind of idea of having some kind of pathway to kind of integrate the harbor area with the historic part of the village, which I think is a great idea. And as the board knows, we've had some recent conversations about a whole redesign of the Timber Creek mulch site, which, as you know, involves moving the boat park to a different location on the mulch site and creating a larger, more integrated space for, I'll loosely call it, hurricane debris management, which is critical to us if we want to get FEMA reimbursement. Without that site for debris management, we wouldn't be able to get the FEMA money. And I understand we got over $1 million of FEMA money during Florence. So that's an important issue. So I hope that whatever comes out of this process, that we can maintain that relationship. I mean, we don't have to agree on everything. I mean, everybody already knows that the village's view and our board of directors' view about the outcome of the ferry issue is not the same. Nobody knows how that's going to end up. That's still uncertain. But that has not impacted developing a more constructive relationship at this level. And I certainly hope that no matter what the outcome is here, that it doesn't stop that process. I think it's very important for us to continue to do whatever we can to try to continue to engage with the village at our level, in areas where there are mutual interests. So thank you. Thank you for letting me make these comments.
Thank you, Robert. Great comments as always from Mr. Drumheller. Anyone either want to respond to Roberts or have further discussion, members on the board about Roberts, or any other comments? I'm happy to respond to Roberts in part.
Robert was very thorough and captured a lot of my sentiments as well. It's you manage all the aspects, both the pros, the wanting to work with, but some of the key logical considerations that go into the decision. So thank you.
Say a few more things. I'll be brief. The first thing is 100% of the member input we have received is a no vote on this. To my knowledge, after 3 years on the board, that's never happened before. In addition, and I think more importantly, we've had either 4 or 5 people who are or have been caregivers or are disabled who commented about this, and their comments were pretty uniform that the proposed access is too long, too high, too difficult for somebody in a wheelchair or just someone who is disabled. And part of that is this, which I hadn't thought about, the difficulty of negotiating the switchbacks that are proposed, which Mike Harriet brought up. I was grateful to Justin for doing the homework on the elevations at 24B versus 16. If you go out there, what you see is on the approach side at 24B, it is virtually flat. I thought it was flat. I guess there's a 2-foot rise, but it's not significant. The slope coming down to the beach from 24B there's a slope there, but it's less than 16. So again, this goes along with making this easy for someone who is disabled trying to use the access. It would clearly be easier at 24B, possibly other locations. It is the last, maybe not the last, but it's one of the last large undisturbed dune areas. And there are 2 silt lots adjacent. So why are we doing it there? One thing that was brought up by John Fisher, which I had not thought about until he spoke, is that, you have a large lot at 42. Everybody knows there's a large lot at 42. So in the summer, everyone drives down there hoping to get a spot, and then it's always full. And then what people do, because they've driven all that way, is they park alongside the road. I think you're going to have the same effect with a large lot at this location. This goes to the point made earlier that we need a master parking plan for the island. That's not BHA's job, but BHA is more than willing to work with the village. You know, we own a lot of land, we can help with that. Let's see. The design guidelines, back to the ARC point. I mean, ARC did look at this and it was very specific what they were looking at, and they were trying to optimize the aesthetics of it. But the design guidelines specifically discourage new accesses adjacent to existing accesses. And to the point that Justin made, we're 200 feet with this proposed 16 from one access and 500 feet from another. Visibility, if you've been to 24B versus the proposed location, 24B is clearly less visible. There are other accesses like 24B that are also less visible than 16B. Cost, you know, yes, we're not paying for this, BHA is not paying for this, but the members are. It is clear that you would have a much larger structure at 16 than you would have at one of the other, say, 24B location. There's the initial cost to build that, and then there's going to be ongoing costs to maintain it. This thing about the 911 access is, as Robert pointed out, that's a red herring. I mean, there are certainly ways for it not to conflict. Last of all, the relationship. I agree. I mean, we have a completely different relationship with the village now than we had previously, and that's a good thing. But I've always believed that a good friend tells you when you're wrong. So I'll leave it at that. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. I'm happy to make comments. Does anyone else have comments?
I'd like to ask a question if I could. Carol, this could be directed at you. Do you know how many responses that we had?
I do not count them. I told Mary when I sat down, I said, I never,
Yes.
I'm gonna say probably in the 50 comment.
Thank you. That would have been my
Carol,
guess.
the only thing I would add to that is that if you look at social media, you have a different form of responses, which Carol didn't necessarily incorporate, but they also uniformly were against us.
That's fine, but you know, when we sit here and we speak and we say we had 100% support, an overwhelming response, we've never heard it before, I'd never had 100% before, and 50 out of 1,850 members took the time to speak out against it. But 1,800 didn't elect to comment at all, which you don't have to go too far to say, well, they didn't care enough one way or the other. The second question, and I won't ask you, Carol, but thank you for your help on the first one, is I don't know all of the respondents, which is my loss, but it certainly appeared to me that the great majority of them live on the beach or have a beach view property. This is the type of response that you would expect from people who live on the beach or have a beach view property. Thank you.
I'd like to make a comment about that.
Sure, go ahead.
Firsthand relation, I agree that directly.
The people online won't be able to hear you. If you
Yeah.
Step up there, and speak into the mic, that's all right. They won't be able to hear you from there.
My name is Sandra Blanche, and happy to be able to be here today. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I do live on the beach. I live directly across from Beach Access 23, so I have no personal interest in the village's proposed site. I do live very, very close to 24B, and I am strongly in favor of utilizing that site there. So just the fact that we live on the beach does not mean that that I know 24B intimately because I have a dog and we walk there. We have circuits that we walk along there. And that's not what the people who live on the beach, we don't think about. It's not a question of not in my backyard. It's a question of the most appropriate site. You know, we're island residents. We love the island and we know what makes sense and what doesn't make sense. I spend hours and hours and hours just observing that entire beach area. And I'm very strongly committed to the 24 for many different reasons, including the completely unused parking lot directly across the street that I asked Chris McCall in 2016 to develop as a parking space, and he's just kind of basically blew me off, and he said people won't walk that far. So that has proven to be not true. They walk a great deal of distance to get to the beach, and so my opposition to the village proposal is not based on the fact that I live on the beach. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
For the opportunity to say that.
I'm happy to provide some comments. I'll be brief. My perspective has been a little different than the other board members. I have been, for the most part, focused on process. And that is, to once this matter surfaced, it was, and that's through Justin's good letter to us and bringing it to our attention. And to his credit, he also spoke to Carrie several months ahead of that, so it wasn't just out of the blue. He really kind of went to Carrie and then ultimately sent a letter to all the board. And then I met with him, I think with John and with Carrie, and we talked it through and we met with the whole board. But at that point in time, it was focused on the issue of the village is proposing to do something different than for which there was approval by the board and by the members in 2019, December 2019 to 2020. And that the members didn't really approve this. The village is doing something different than what was approved. And so I really focused on that issue and what was represented at that point in time in December. They came to the board, the village did in December of 2019, and asked that we approve this. And it was at that time a proposal for improving an existing boardwalk and access that was already there, access 15. And that was already there, or it wasn't clear which access it was they were talking about. Nonetheless, it was to improve the existing walkway and have a parking lot at that point in time. And that was approved by the board. And then it was presented to the members, and that was approved by the members. And so the village had proceeded forward with that level of approval. But it was sort of a small dollar sort of improve an existing walkway and make it accessible to the handicapped. All of that's good, and everybody would, at least we as the board approved. It hadn't gone dark. It wasn't a new project. It was improving an existing project and adding on ADA. But when we, at least over the next year and a half, the village had sort of proceeded forward, but pandemic got in the middle, it slowed things down. And somewhere along the way in that year and a half, the project got increased significantly from what it was before. And also there had been a change from lot 1313 to 1319. And that change actually occurred on December 18th of 2019, which was like 5 days after the board had approved. But the village village had been looking at that lot, 1319, for well over a year. But they thought they weren't going to be able to buy it, or for whatever reason, they didn't think they were going to be able to get it, and so they went forward. And all the written description of what was going to happen was based on 1313, which would have been adjacent to an existing walkway. And then they bought 1319. And so some level of confusion arose as a result of that. Most all of us who were involved, at least aware of things going on there, or had reason to be, we were believing there's going to be an improvement in existing walkway. Then Kerry, in the normal course, kind of following what the village was doing, identified that, well, there is in fact going to be a significant increase in scope and size of this project. And that would necessitate ARC approval, but the village hadn't sought ARC approval. But at that point in time, Kerry requested that they do, and they did. The village went to the ARC. And in all due respect to Robert's comments, I don't believe what the ARC did was insignificant. There is an exceptionally well qualified group of 18 people on the ARC, and they're split up in two sections, 9 each. They worked on it, and they put a lot of work in trying to decide whether it was the right structure. Whether it's the right structure and the lot. They didn't deal with the question of whether or not there was the beach access issue and or whether alternative locations. They say that that's for the board to decide. And I believe that's what the covenants say. Covenants really split it up in that we, the board, are obligated to decide that there's going to be a new beach access. We have to make a decision. So and I know I'm going on a long time. I apologize but this has been complicated. So in any event, there was confusion that existed. They went to the ARC. The ARC on October 15th, 2021 considered it, and in a very significant or substantial, as their work is. Fran does exceptionally good work, as do the members, and I don't in any way want to downgrade that. They rejected it, and the village then went back to the drawing board. And then thereafter, by December 20th, there was again a presentation by the village at the ARC. John was there. John is our outstanding liaison to the ARC. John does an incredibly good job of doing that. He was there and really pointed out all these issues and many of the concerns we're talking about today. And asked that the village go back and pare down their plan, reduce it in size and in scope. Well, the village did. The village went back and they pared it down. They pared it down significantly. And in, I think it was February 24th, I'll get to that. February 24th, the board, the ARC approved it. And they approved it, but I was at that meeting. It was an important meeting, but they're all important. But anyway, I was at that meeting. That didn't make it important. I was there because I think John couldn't be there at that particular time to ask me to come. But they considered it thoroughly. However, they did focus clearly and say, our focus is on the structure and the parking lot. They had asked the ARC had asked the village to reduce the size and scope of their parking lot. They did that. They cut it from like 43 parking spaces down to some 25, I think it was. They made a significant cut. And you also were all here, and you heard our good Mayor Quinn say, if parking is the issue, let's talk. They'll give on that. He said, I want to have this access approved. This is what's important. If it's the parking that's bothering you, we can work it out, which is really just essentially saying, let's talk about it. Let's see if that's the issue. Let's come up with a compromise. We want to get the access. Any event, the ARC approved it, went forward. It then came to us the next time. So then my focus was at that point in time was then figuring out, okay, what is the proper process to follow? You may recall this long compass that you got from us. We have a communication group that really does a great job of getting these compass out right away. There was one of these long, detailed 4-step processes that we really got out of the covenants, working through the covenants. It's kind of the various steps that need to take place in the process, and it's led to the public meetings and the portion of the covenants that really focus on saying, get the input of the members. That's in there. Justin has pointed that out for us as well, but it's there. We're aware of that, and that's what we wanted to do. So anyway, I've been focused on that process, and I've been delighted with the way the process worked. Just as Robert said, John, really, the input you all have given us is great. I also have some level of agreement. Joe, I agree with all this, everything Joe says. But nonetheless, a point is, the reality is, 50 people is hugely significant. Everybody objected. And in the normal and ordinary course, it's the people that don't like it are going to want ones that write in. That doesn't mean you minimize those objections, but others are out there that they say, that's great, go ahead, do what you're going to do, or who knows what they say. But I believe it's significant that 50 have been involved, whether it's 50 or 45 or 55, that makes much difference. As others have pointed out, it's a hugely significant commitment from our members. We've heard from you, and that stands out to me. But one of the other things that I've had in connection with trying to develop the process and make it work, I've met so many times with the village and with Chris and with Peter, and just kind of developing the process and the procedure and getting all the facts. One of the things that stood out to me is that Chris McCall is an absolute pearl. He is our village manager, and he has put his heart and soul in this. And he has absolutely no bad intentions. This is all good in his mind. He has, for the last 15 years, devoted himself to our beach and our island, and making this really good for us. It's the best he can. And as to that beach, you heard him. He sat there and he did this. He said the same thing to me, and you can see it, but it came from his heart. I built that dune. I am the last person on this island that wants to damage that dune. I believe that. I believe that absolutely true. By the same token, that doesn't decide the issue, but it told me that we have a really good village manager. When I sat down with, Carrie and I sat down with Peter and Chris after Justin met with us. The board authorized us to have that meeting to say, okay, let's figure out a solution to this. There was confusion. You guys are proceeding forward on what was a approval for one thing, and you're doing something much bigger. We got to go back to the members on it. And to Peter's blessing, in my mind, I sat there and listened to him, and he didn't touch a bit. You're absolutely right. We have to go back and do a redo of this. And he was very anxious to go forward and get it done because he wants to get a handicap access bill. But there wasn't any argument or question at all. We have an incredibly cooperative mayor. He wants to do the right thing. You've heard him multiple times throughout all this. I've been very impressed by him. And I've known him for 20 years. It wasn't like anything new. I knew he was impressive. But the fact that he just instantly said that, yeah, we got to hear from the members and hear what they have to say, and here it's all required. So this is not an adversarial situation. By the same token, people have their heart and soul built in, and Chris in part because this is his career, this is his life, this is where he's been, Brunswick County, and for the last X number of years here, and he's 18 years here and doing it. So all of that stood out to me, and that moves me, and it's impressive. It doesn't excite me, but nonetheless, I cannot pass by saying we are blessed by having an incredibly good supporting village staff, and if there's a way to support them, I would support them. And as I say, also, if it turned on the parking lot, Peter made it clear that that isn't, that we can make a deal on that, and I believe that. I have the belief it's not about the parking lot. I believe the parking lot's there as an issue, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about something entirely different. I think those were the, and I guess I also start from the point of view that myself of picking beach accesses. It's not like I can pick beach accesses, you know, argue about a contract or argue about people who fight for the side or do something like that. But in terms of me looking at these and saying, which is better beach access, best beach access, I'm not skilled to do that. John's an engineer, Joe's an engineer, Robert's exceptionally bright in everything. And they're skilled in being able to do those kind of things. I'm not blessed. Tiffany's sufficiently quiet. I never know exactly what's going on.
I do that on purpose.
I know. And Jennifer, she hides on the screen, so I don't get to see her too often, but I know I'm not real able of figuring out what the best is. So I appreciate listening to people. I give deference to the village, and it doesn't decide it for me. But I start off with a presumption that these are people qualified to do it. We elected them, we employ them. They've been doing that work for years, and I give high preference to their selection. I don't easily walk away from that and say I pick something else over. So I do have that in the background. Again, that didn't decide it for me, but I start off with a presumption that they act out of expertise and out of good motivation and good skills. Everything I've seen so far supports that. Those are the comments that I had that myself as to kind of what I have found significant in this process.
I have a question. Perhaps you could explain what happens, either which way the vote would go, what
Yes.
would happen next in either
Sure.
scenario.
Two possibilities. That is, one, we approve it, or two, we disapprove it. If we disapprove it, the ballgame's over. And that is, it goes no further. It does not have to go to members for a meeting for removal of the single family limitation, because we haven't approved it. So the village, I mean, they got to jump through a couple of hoops, and we're the first two. So if we say no, that's it. If we say yes, we approve it, then it goes to the members. And the members, as Robert pointed out, have to approve it for it to be approved. And that takes a quorum of 150.
150,
Pardon,
150.
150 members. And we have in the range of 1,500, 1,800 members. 1,800, is that it, Carol? And so it takes a quorum of 150 to be able, for the meeting to be able to be a meeting, an official meeting. And they either appear by proxy or in person. It's just like a regular annual meeting. In the normal course, we do these kind of things at the annual meeting, but there was a desire by the village and really by all of us to proceed forward. Everybody would like a handicap access. So it was kind of moving along. We thought that justified having a special meeting of members. So if we say, yes, it goes to the members have to come up with 100 people, 150 people who vote, and 2/3 of whom vote in favor. That doesn't, if they don't, then it doesn't pass. So, is that responsive?
Yes, it is. And then should it go to the members for a vote, what is that? How long does that take?
Well, that was a step process. We put the two together, and all the papers are ready to send out. If we have to give the members 30 days notice of calling a special meeting. But we told them like a month ago that if this is passed, we are calling a special meeting. That meeting will be June 7th. The proxies will go out next week. The information will go out next week. You all know and have seen the information essentially, and that will go out. And the members then will have till May 30th to get in a proxy, if I recall, or they can come to the meeting and vote. So there's the usual, it's just like an annual meeting, but there's one single issue. There's no issue on the table other than that. There will not be any brilliant speeches by any of us. There will only be just the vote will be in, and we will count the vote and we'll either pass or
That answers it, yes.
so that's basically the procedures. Any discussion or questions by the board before we vote? Members have any questions that we could address before we go to a vote? There being none, we then have to have a motion. Someone.
Alan, I have a motion to make that I'd like to make. But before I make the motion, just for the purposes of clarity, you had told us in the past that if in the theoretically possible event that your vote is 3-3, the implication under North Carolina law is that the motion is not approved. Is that our correct understanding?
I'm not sure it's North Carolina's law as much as the Robert's Rules of Order might be both, but at least it takes a majority to pass, and maybe our bylaws, but you got any motion here, you got to pass it by a majority. That's why most boards are an odd number. We are an even number because we always go along and there's never dissension or discussion. But you got to have a majority. A majority of 6 is 4, and so it takes 4.
All right, well, all right, I'd like to make a motion if that's okay.
Okay.
All right, so John, can you put the motion up on the screen, or do you want me to just read it, or?
Yeah, you can read it as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, I move that the board recommend to our members that the covenants restricting lot 1319 to single-family residential be lifted to permit the village to build the ADA beach access according to the plan previously submitted and approved by the ARC. And I further move that a special members meeting be held to vote on this approval.
Well, that issue isn't really before us. The only issue before us is whether or not we approve the application of the village for approval of this access. The single family limitation will go or not go thereafter if we approve it. That happens. But the single thing we as a board have to decide is whether or not to approve the application by the village for proceeding forward with the construction of this project. If we approve it, we can then go to your next motion, and that is sending the single family limitation to the members with a recommendation of whatever recommendation we want. But we
All right,
gotta-
well, that being the case, is the first part of this motion effectuate what you're looking for? I move that the board recommend to our members that the covenants of lot 1319 to single-family residential be lifted to permit the village to build the beach access according to the plan approved by the ARC.
Again, that's not what we're dealing with.
How about this? I move that we approve the plan of the village to build the ADA access at 16 at lot 1319 as requested by the village.
I believe that to be the proper motion of the issue we are deciding. Needs a second, and by John making the motion, it doesn't mean he supports it, but it puts the motion on the table for us to vote on.
All right, so that's the motion. I will provide a second to that.
Is there any further discussion on that motion? All in favor of the motion? Also, Robert earlier indicated he wanted to have a division so for at least identification that we identify how we're voting. None of this anonymity anymore. We can't hide. And that's a perfectly proper request to make. There's nothing the matter with that. That's under Robert's rules.
Can you repeat the motion again to lift the covenants in order for the village to pursue their plan? Is that?
No, that's got nothing to do with it. John's motion is very simple. Pass the request of the village to build the access
At 1319.
at 1319. Yes, that's the motion. You either pass it or we don't pass it. This is to approve it. John said motion to approve it. That's, you should put it on before us in a positive fashion. And that is you either, and his motion is see how many people vote for approving it.
I gotcha.
In order for that motion to pass, succeed, it takes 4 hands going up. So at this stage, let's just individually vote and raise your hand if you are in favor of that motion. The motion fails. Wait, I couldn't see. Robert, I can guess. Robert?
I'm voting no. I
Okay.
couldn't see what was going on.
Yeah, I'm
but-
voting no too.
Is that,
I am voting in favor, but Robert seconded it, right?
Yeah, you're voting in favor of building the access.
I seconded the motion because the motion has to be drafted in a certain way, but I'm actually voting against it.
all right, let me see if I can explain. If you want this project to go forward for the village, you do not raise your hand.
Oh, sorry, okay, then
Okay. The result's the same. It does not pass. The motion fails.
Oh, so Alan, I couldn't tell. What was the final tally?
The final tally was,
5-1 against.
5-1? Okay. All right, I couldn't see. I'm sorry. I just couldn't see. 5-1? All right, thank you.
That's correct. And the motion fails. And there's no further work for us to do. So the motion to adjourn.
So moved?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for shepherding us through this process, team. Appreciate it. Well done.
Thanks. Thanks for the good process.
Thanks, Justin. Justin.
Yes.
Are you willing to volunteer now to participate for the board or not? You got to speak to all.
Now, if you don't want to volunteer to serve on the board, we will take you on the ARC. So I'll write you in for that.
And if you don't want
Sounds
to
good.
participate, we may reconsider this vote.
Alan,
I think that